Bishop Lifting has become a large company with a big nationwide footprint of rigging shops and even retail locations. One of the regions that's a bit newer to the Bishop family is the Northwest, where we have 4 locations. We have Woods Logging in Longview and Cedar Woolley, and West Tech Rigging Supply in Eugene and Salem, Oregon. As Northwest companies, logging represents a major market segment for us. We deal with large-scale professional logging operations, as well as small operations that have basic needs. But no matter the size of the logging company, one of the products they need almost universally are logging chokers. And today on the table, we have some different examples of the types that we offer, so let's go over that in more detail. So let's start with a pretty basic question. What is a choker? How is it used? Well, chokers are used for quite literally choking around a piece of wood. It could be a log or timber, so that you can move it from point A to point B. And when it comes to chokers, cat chokers are the most popular. Now, where the name comes from is a bit debatable. I think the idea is that this choker was traditionally used behind a cat. So let's talk about what that choker looks like. So on this piece of wood right here, we have a cat choker installed on the top. So you have an eye on one end, and then you have a choker nub connected into the bell. Now obviously this choker is very small in scale because it's made just for demonstration purposes, but that's how this choker is applied in the field. Now one nice thing about a cat choker is because of the eye on the end, you can connect this a lot of different ways to buzzard hooks, draw pins, shackles, winch hooks, hitches. Really, there are a lot of options. Now the size of choker that you use and what you connect it to is largely determined by the job that you're working. In this application, we have just one small choker on one log, and this represents actually a pretty typical use for a lot of our customers. They may have storm damage, down trees on their property, and they just need to move a little bit of debris from one point to another. But in larger professional logging operations, they might be running multiple chokers at one time. When you're doing that, you're probably going to be hanging them off of a larger cable with a larger hook so that you can gather multiple chokers onto one point of attachment. No matter your application, whether it's small scale or large scale, we offer chokers for you. So for our average homeowner, a small choker like 3/8, ½ inch is going to do the job. For professional loggers, they might use that same size, ½ inch, maybe 9/16, but they're probably going to be running multiple at one time. So no matter your needs, we have smaller diameters or larger diameters, and we have shorter lengths and longer lengths. But let's talk about the length of the choker because it's not only dictated by the size of the log, which you might think, it could also depend on how far you need to reach. So for example, you have down trees on your property, you're using a tractor or maybe even your pickup to go out and retrieve that timber and get it out of the way. Well, if the timber is right next to the road or it's immediately accessible, then a short choker might be just fine. If you have to go through some brush to get there, you might need a 20-foot or 30-foot choker to reach the down timber. So logic follows that a larger size choker will handle larger logs, heavier logs, and that's true, but keep this in mind, the bigger the choker, the heavier they get. And you're gonna have to pull that choker around from point A to point B. And again, they do get heavy because as you go up in cable diameter, all of the associated fittings get bigger as well. So in this industry, the names seem kind of funny, but they actually are Micro Midget, Midget, Dwarf, and Bantam. And that represents the sizes of choker hooks available. And those choker hooks speak to a certain diameter of cable that takes a certain nub diameter. So in this setup right here in front of me, you can see all these nubs are the same size. Well, these are all Midget nubs. A Midget nub is going to be found on 3/8 through 9/16. And that nub will always fit a Midget bell or even a Micro Midget bell. So on a 3/8 choker, if you buy them from us, they're going to come with a Micro Midget bell. If you get a ½ inch or a 9/16 choker, they're going to come with a Midget bell. Again, they take the same nub, so in some ways they're interchangeable, but as you go up in cable diameter, a slightly larger bell makes sense. You get up to 5/8, and that's a Dwarf bell, and then 3/4 inch is a Bantam bell. And those bells get quite a bit bigger, quite a bit heavier, and again, the nubs that go with them get heavier as well. So I've talked about how popular cat chokers are, but there's also another type of choker we sell, and it's called a Skidder choker. Now these aren't quite as popular, and the reason for that is they have a nub on each end. So again, this piece right here being the nub, notice there's no eye on a Skidder choker. So this short piece of cable represents a Skidder choker. It has a nub on each end. You might be asking yourself, well, how would I attach that? And that's what this layout right here is to represent. So this piece of cable, which is larger in diameter, represents your main line, which could be called a winch line or a drum line. There's different names in the industry for it, but this is coming off of your main winch. This cable is going to be larger in diameter than the chokers. It has a nub on one end, and then it has these slider attachments, which are really just a type of choker hook that slide up and down the cable. And there's an end slider or a sleeve slider, which has a smaller diameter hole. This one's meant to come up against the nub. And then you have your ring sliders, which have a larger diameter hole just to facilitate easy sliding up and down the winch line. So again, the application for skidder chokers is if you have a tractor or some sort of a larger winch with a larger diameter cable, you can run multiple chokers at one time off of your main line. Now commonly what we see is a 5/8 inch or 3/4 inch diameter winch line. If you notice, this diameter is bigger than these smaller chokers. And that's on purpose. You never want to overload your main line. So if you have a 5/8 or a 3/4 winch line, you could be running 3/8 or 1/2 inch chokers, possibly 9/16. Exactly how many you run at one time is up to you. You just don't want to overload your main line. Typically we see our customers run anywhere from like 3 to 6 chokers off of their slider assembly. So with sliders, these days they're really only made in the midget size. So the idea is that people are moving smaller timber overall, especially in the Northwest. That's pretty true. So a larger diameter slider system isn't very applicable. You'd have to have like a 1 inch or larger main line and be running 5/8 or 3/4 inch chokers off of that. And that's just not really common. So unfortunately, a lot of the companies who make this stuff have scaled down, and about the only sliders we have now are 1/2 inch. We can make skidder chokers or high lead chokers, which have a nub on each end in larger diameters and longer lengths. And there are professional applications where our customers still use those, but they're not very common. The most common size you're gonna see for our customers in a slider system is probably 1/2 inch. So another type of choker that we offer is a chain choker. And frankly, out west, it's not as popular as it is out east. Not really sure why, but that's just the way it is. And chain chokers really work similar to a skidder choker system where they're set up like sliders. So in the last setup, we were showing you sliders on a cable system. Well, this is also called a log slide. That's the technical name for it. And it's meant just to slide on this cable similar to a wire rope skidder choker setup. The difference is it connects to a coupling link, which goes to a logger grab, and the logger grab connects to this chain. Let me show you how. So simply take the chain, drape it through the pocket, and lock in a link on the back side, like so. Now picture multiple of these running on one drum line, and that's how you would have a chain choker system, where you could have multiple chokes happening at one time. On the other end, this chain choker hook is having the chain pass through it, and it has a similar opening, so the chain is meant to slip through that opening, and then it will naturally find a choke as you apply tension. Now you can see here, just an important note, the way this bolt is installed, on any hook, the chain choker hook is no different, the head should be on this side because you don't want the head on this side where it could interfere with trying to insert the chain. Now these bolts are relatively small in profile, but it's just a point worth noting that when you're installing pins or bolts on hooks like this, have the fat side away from the choke. So you might be asking, why would I want chains instead of cable or cable instead of chains? And yes, we're using cable and wire rope interchangeably. It's okay. I think everybody knows what we're talking about. So it's a good question. Here's something to consider. Imagine taking this chain, whether it's the hook or the other end, and trying to slip it under a log that is on the ground, perhaps surrounded by mud, snow, dirt, whatever. Now picture doing that with a wire rope nub that's much stiffer and also tapered in terms of the profile. It's much easier to take that and jam it underneath the log and set your choke that way than it is to work with chain. Now one thing they do make, and you'll find it on our site, is called a grab rod. And that grab rod exists for that very reason. Because it's so difficult to get limp chain underneath the log, the grab rod simply has a hook on the end and it's stiff with a handle, and you just shove it under the log, connect it into the link of chain, and pull it back through. Now in this setup, I'm showing you 3/8 chain, which really is the most common. This hook is sized specifically for 3/8 chain. This logger grab is specifically sized for 3/8 chain. They do make smaller chain choker hooks in 1/4 inch. In fact, we saw a lot of portable winches, and the chain choker that they offer is a 1/4 inch chain choker, which is really designed for smaller scale operations. People aren't typically harvesting logs professionally using a capstan winch. So if you're a property owner or a hunter or a rancher and you just need to move some brush, you can use a 1/4 inch chain choker, much smaller and lighter, and it should get the job done just fine. So the question is then, which choker is right for you? I would always default to a cat choker, typically 3/8 or 1/2 inch. If you're a property owner, rancher, you have a relatively small scale project, a 3/8 or 1/2 inch choker is gonna accomplish most of what you need. And again, we can make them in longer lengths if that's what you require for your job. Let me demonstrate really quickly why I think wire rope chokers or cable chokers are more popular than chain. So if you take this is a very short skidder choker example, but it doesn't really matter. It could be a cat choker. Watch how easily I can take this nub, insert it, and lock it into place. Now imagine if I'm trying to do that and stick it under a log that is packed tight to the ground. That's really hard to do with chain. Again, I would need a grab rod or some other device to get that chain under the log, and that's difficult to do, and it's time consuming. It can be really frustrating. For our professional or large scale logging operations, a 5/8 or 3/4 inch choker might be what you need, but again, that's not the average customer for us. Remember too, like I said, that skidder chokers are somewhat application specific. Unless you have a tractor with a large winch line and a slider system, you're probably not gonna want to run a skidder choker, a nub on each end. There's no way to easily connect this to your pickup or to your tractor, again, unless you have a specific setup using sliders. If you are a large scale logging operation or some kind of contractor that has a big project coming up where you have to move large timber, we can make chokers up to 1 inch in diameter, possibly even larger. The hardware associated with that gets pretty big. But we do have that capability, we have that type of inventory, so if you have special needs for large scale chokers, let us know, we can take care of you. One important point to note is that logging chokers such as this are never to be used for overhead lifting outside of logging operations. In Oregon and Washington, the OSHA regulations do allow for these logging chokers to be used in very specific ways, but in general industry, general job sites around the country, customers should not be using these for overhead lifting. The nubs and the choker bell are simply not rated for that. We do have a product on our site called a sliding choker sling made with wire rope and a special hook. So if you need to do overhead lifting and you want to use one of those, make sure you order the right product. Okay, so now you should be armed with the knowledge that you need to choose the right choker for your next job. And we understand this video might not answer all of your questions, so please reach out to us if we can help further. You can reach us on our website via live chat at lifting.com or navigate to the Contact Us page, fill out the form, or even locate a branch near you. Again, thanks for watching. If you got something out of this, please like the video, leave a comment, or share it. We certainly do appreciate the engagement. We'll see you on the next one.